This is Into the Singleverse with Raj Verma. Unfiltered conversations about the latest trends and the tangible effects of real-time data on pivotal industries, our daily lives, and the future of our world.
Ashton Kutcher is a remarkable individual who has made a significant impact both in the entertainment industry and in the world of technology. In addition to his acting career that he's done very, very well at, he has become a powerful force for good through his non-profit organization, namely Thorn, that I'm very delighted to have partnered with him on. Thorn's mission is to defend children from online sexual exploitation. Ashton and his team have partnered with tech companies like ours to develop innovative products that identify and eliminate child sexual abuse material on the internet. Their tireless efforts have already helped countless children around the world, and they continue to make a difference every day.
Ashton, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure. Not too many people know your association with MemSQL then in Singlestore now. And apart from your many accomplishments as an actor, philanthropist, you're also a technologist. So welcome to the show, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Excellent. So, I've been here 4 years, and you've been associated with MemSQL for almost a decade now. So what started your interest with this?
I mean, Raj, I'm OG. Like, I predate you within Singlestore. I think I was a seed investor in the company. And at the time, there was a bunch of innovation happening around memory and storage. And everything was moving from ROM to RAM storage. And I thought that was interesting, like the ability to have sort of instant large corpus recall. I thought would be ultimately be really valuable for just for computing in general. And at the time, it was a huge innovation. Now I think that people are used to it, and all of a sudden there's this NoSQL and 100 other different things that I frankly don't understand completely, but I still understand what we're doing. So
no, absolutely not too many people understand NoSQL, Ashton. So we don't blame you. All right. Hey, look, of the various, we got 300 customers and some really good ones. As I said, half our customers are Fortune 500 customers. The favorite story that I have is around Thorn, an organization that you started, a philanthropic organization that you started. So really two questions for you. One is, what spurred your interest in philanthropy, and why the cause that eventually manifested itself in Thorn?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I've always had an interest in philanthropy. I have a twin brother, and when we were 12 years old, he had a heart transplant. That was a incredibly taxing time for my family. My family was a middle income family, but the hospital bills started to build up and build up and build up and build up. During that period of time, my brother was in the hospital a lot, and my parents, in order to be with him, not knowing whether or not he would get a heart transplant, not knowing whether or not he would get better, had to sacrifice the time that they would have otherwise spent at work to be there for him. So from an economic standpoint, our family was really underwater, and our community came together and our school came together and did a big fundraiser to help the family out. And it was the first time in my life when I was 12 years old that I saw what philanthropy really was about. It was about, it wasn't about the notion that people weren't willing to work hard. My parents are some of the hardest working people I know and have ever met in my entire life. But sometimes people fall under circumstances that are not of their own doing, and they're unfortunate circumstances, and they need help. And so that was my first introduction to philanthropy. It was an eye-opening thing to see, and it was an eye-opening thing for my family to receive that level of generosity from a community that you think your community is going to be there to support you, but when you fall in hard times, you find out whether or not they are, and ours was. And so I think that ingrained in me a sense of need to participate in that kind of community and that kind of a society. And so from that point on in my life, my perspective on philanthropy and generosity and community have been one of seeking out individuals or organizations or countries or places, people that are in need, and doing everything I can to help. So I started to do that, and then as I got famous from acting, I was being pulled in a lot of directions. There were a lot of different organizations that were constantly reaching out, saying, "Hey, can you come to this event? Can you support this event? Can you do this thing?" And I felt like I was philanthropically being spread thin, but that if I actually focused my energy on one specific thing, I could probably achieve some things that had never been done before. So I started kind of surfing the world looking for a problem that I felt like was a big problem. That was a problem that spoke to my heart and that I could dedicate my life to, because real hard problems require a dedication of a lifetime to really solve. And my ex-wife and I were watching a Dateline special, and there were these kids in Cambodia that were 5, 6 years old that were being sold into the sex trade. Basically, there were tourists that were coming to Cambodia and raping these children, um, and some other individuals were profiting off of that. And when I saw it, I was in shock because I couldn't believe that that kind of thing was actually happening in the world. Nobody ever talked about that kind of thing happening in the world. And then I started looking for organizations that were really effectively doing something about it. And most of the organizations that I found were filled with extraordinarily well-meaning individuals, um, but that had insanely limited resources, um, and none of them were using technology as a tool to fight back against this issue. And at the time, I was an investor in a bunch of companies, and Uber and Airbnb and MemSQL and this one and that one, the other one, and I saw these extraordinary companies being built through utilization of the efficiency of technology. And I thought it'd be very interesting to try to build a philanthropic initiative to solve this problem using all the things that we've learned through scaling software companies. So that's how Thorn was born, and now we focus on elimination of child sexual abuse material from the internet, and that is our pursuit.
What a wonderful story, both about your community that you grew up around and you having picked this cause, and just absolutely delighted to be part of this. What's been the impact of Thorn on the world? What are the statistics?
Well, it depends on which statistics we want to dig into. I think we've identified over 25,000 children that are being sexually abused. I think we have over a billion, I think, images that we've reviewed, and right now we're responsible for a large percentage of the reports that are going into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Um, so what we've really built is a platform that allows us to look to have hashes, which are basically, for anybody who doesn't understand what a hash is, it's an image. It's basically like a fingerprint of an image. And so we can match fingerprints of these images to images that are online, and then positive, identify the matches. So if we know something is an already reported piece of child sexual abuse material, we can then look at the images without seeing the image, but just seeing a fingerprint of the image, and match those, and then identify who the individuals that are posting this content are, and then remove it and report that to the appropriate law enforcement.
That's incredible. As I said, one of my favorite stories of all of our customers is the Thorn story. And on that subject of technology to protect the most vulnerable in our society, Ashton, I'm a father of two lovely girls, at least most of the time. And one of the stats that hit me hard was the rising rate of suicide in teenage girls, which is almost directly attributable to social media and the mobile phones, which has led to the highest suicide rates in 120 years since this stat has been kept. Now we are in this AI arm race, so as to speak, that was kicked off with Chat GPT. So, where do you think this world is headed, and what can people like you and I do to keep it a safe place?
Okay, well, there's a lot there to untangle. Let's first tackle the suicide rate and the increased rate around suicide. I think we look at suicide rates just in general, and then we look at other variable comorbidities that exist in society. They're all relatively linked to one thing. And a lot of people, when they look at human health, they look at a lot of different factors, and they look at driving automobiles, or they might want to look at like cholesterol levels or high blood pressure, hypertension, or all of these other things, diabetes. But in fact, if you look at the commonality across a lot of the one of the major comorbidities that exist in humanity is loneliness, and I think that there is a sense of connectivity that we have when we interact with people online that doesn't replace actual human interaction with one another. And that loneliness, I think, is a cause for a lot of the suicide that we see. So people have this assumption that when we're on social media or connecting with people, that we're getting that same hit. But there are multiple hormones in our body that dictate our happiness. One of those hormones is dopamine. And oftentimes, when we get likes on things or we're connecting with people online, we get a big dopamine hit. But there's another very important hormone that's in our body, and those are cannabinoids. And those natural cannabinoids inside of our body, those are what actually come when we get a hug from a friend, or we feel closeness with a friend. And we don't get that same hormone when we're interacting with people online. And so those two things can easily inside of our body be mistaken as the same thing, but they're not. And so there's a sense of friendship, but the drop of dopamine then it leaves a vacuum of dopamine, and we feel like we want more of it. And so then we have this sense of not being happy, or the sense of being lonely very quickly after making connections online, whereas those human interactions have much longer effects and life cycles of enduring happiness. So I think that loneliness epidemic, and specifically to this child sexual abuse piece, it's connected to something else, which is not all people have positive intentions when they're online. And the same way that a lot of these tools that we have that make life much, much better online, and much more efficient to do good things, these same tools can be used to create efficiencies in doing really awful, inhumane things. And we're, one being the rise of child sexual abuse material being shared online. We can share things very efficiently, very easily, and very covertly through encrypted networks online. And that's really, really helpful to be able to do if you're a journalist in a country that persecutes journalists or persecutes people for leveraging freedom of speech. But it's also extraordinarily useful if you're a person that has a child sexual abuse image and you want to share it, and you want to covertly share it and not get caught sharing it. And so it causes for an increase of the share rates. And what's happening now is another thing called sextortion, where you have these very ill-intended individuals that reach out to young children and get them to self-produce content. So they start to befriend them, they become friends with them, they get them to send a nude image of themselves. And then they go back to them and they say, amazing, I'm going to share this with all your friends and everyone you know, unless you send me something worse, or something that maybe you interacting with another kid. Okay, now I'm going to take this image of you interacting with this other kid, and I'm going to share that with everyone in the world. unless you send me something that is even more than that. And on it goes. And that's a process called grooming and then sextortion. And that leads to a extraordinary rate of suicide in young people. And this is happening in mass volumes. I think most recently there was a organized crime group that was operating under that. And at the end of this, they go, "Why don't you pay me $1,000 and maybe I won't share it?" Well, the kids don't want to approach their parents and tell them that they did this bad thing, and then therefore, and then so then they are committing suicide at alarming rates. And there's been a organized crime group that's been leveraging this tactic to get financial gain. And there, I think there were 18 suicides just in the last couple of weeks as a result of that organized crime group that's doing that. So that's another sexual exploitation crime that's taking place that does quickly lead to suicide. So this is an issue, and we have to deal with it, and we have to figure out how to manage our screen time, but also figure out how to use technology to fight back against that grooming and that sextortion. And there's detection that we can do, and use the same hash matching or perceptive hash matching or privacy protected machine learning in order to identify these language patterns, which leads us to OpenAI. And where OpenAI could be extraordinarily valuable is understanding that token sequence or that language sequence that is consistent, that people that are grooming children are using. And on the flip side, if the endpoints in these large language models aren't created effectively, groomers and sextortionists could use these large language models to groom children and be more effective at their crimes. So the wonderful thing that we have, and the wonderful opportunity that I see as somebody that is living between these two spaces, is that Sam Altman and OpenAI, they want to work on this problem. They want to help us solve this problem. They want to build in the safeguards on this problem. I've spoken with the folks at Stability and some of the open source models. They want to solve this problem. They want to work on this. They want to actually create solutions to this. Spoken with the folks at Anthropic. They want to solve this problem. So a lot of the people that are building these generative AI models are doing so with the consciousness of how can we build this and also increase detection, but also have the ability to create endpoints in our models that don't produce this kind of content, that don't create synthetic CSAM images. And so I'm hopeful because I think the people that are building this technology are cognizant of this issue. Whereas when Mark Zuckerberg was creating Facebook, I don't think he could have foreseen that it would be used in that way. I don't think a lot of the people that were creating some of the early social media platforms were conscious of the fact that their platform would be used in these kinds of nefarious ways. And so now they're fighting retroactively. Whereas I think a lot of the people that are building these generative platforms understand the threat and understand that if you can mitigate it up front, you can actually build safe technology over time.
Oh, that's a great answer, and I completely agree. I think conscious, courageous leadership would be required to continue to protect our kids and the more vulnerable members of our society. Last question for you, Ashton. I heard you ran the New York Marathon this year in under 4 hours, and that was, 3 years after you almost couldn't walk for a couple of weeks. Tell us about that experience and how that came around, and why did you try to attempt that?
Yeah. So Thorn had secured passes to run the New York Marathon. This is before COVID hit, and I had agreed to do it. Then COVID hit, and then I had this health scare, which is a really rare autoimmune disorder that affected my inner ear and created some balance issues. And I had to go from learning how to walk again to learn how to run again to running a marathon, because I said I was going to do it. And if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. And so I started training, and we ticked off a bunch of miles and got across the finish line. And I hit my goal. My goal was 4 hours, and I think I came in at like 3:54. So I pulled it off. But boy, let me tell you something. I'm not a marathon runner. I mean, my goal was to run a marathon, not to be a marathon runner, and I now know I am not a marathon runner. This is not the thing that I'm going to derive long term joy from.
You did say that the last few miles were a spiritual experience where your body had kind of given up, and it was just you. Yeah.
Man, you know what I did? I got somebody told me before the race that it's a 20-mile race and then it's a 6-mile race, and they were dead right. I got to the last 6 miles and everything in you is telling you to stop and to quit. And I just started looking at the fans that were cheering on the side, and I would find a kid and I'd be like, "I'm running this for Thorn. I'm running this for you." I find another kid. I'm running this for Thorn. I'm running this for you. And I've just tried to run from kid to kid to kid to kid until I hit the finish line. And then I got to see my own kids.
Ashton, you're a good man, and it's just a privilege to know you, to be associated with you. You take care and keep making this world a better place for our kids, for the vulnerable in society, and stay well.
And thank you for all that you all do to help us achieve our mission. Your support means the world to us, and it allows us to do our work. So thank you.
Thank you, Ashton. That was incredible. And it's always a learning experience for me to have a chat with you. And that's it for this episode of Into the Singleverse. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to automatically receive future episodes. Additionally, I would greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to leave a review, helping others like you discover the show. I'll see you next time. Stay well and be good.
This was Into the Singleverse with Raj Verma. If you want to learn how to unleash the immense power of data, go to Singlestore.com. Into the Singleverse is a production of Forbes Books.